I don't know if it's because I'm getting older or whatever, but I've been going on a nostalgia tour recently. You know, your typical listening to the Minecraft soundtrack on YouTube. You know which video I'm talking about. Getting emotional over Subwoofer Lullaby. Remembering the good old days when you were a kid before being burdened with all these responsibilities you got as an adult. Well, I did have my worries as a kid, like a spelling test or waiting for the book you put on hold 2 months ago in elementary school to be available because there's only one copy of it in the school library, even though it was a very popular book series. That used to piss me off. Speaking about books, I've been hella nostalgic about the books I read growing up in the 2010s, because when I was younger, I was an avid book reader. I don't mean to flex, but I was reading a book a day.
Come on.
And I'm not talking about the Very Hungry Caterpillar type of books. Like, anyone could go through a Diary of a Wimpy Kid book during their lunch period. I'm talking books that were just words. The only picture you would see would be the illustration on the cover. And I hope I'm not the only person who did this, but as a kid, I would only read a book if it had an interesting cover. It's kind of only like watching a YouTube video because you like the thumbnail. But anyways, I was a huge book nerd as a kid. It started with the Diary of the Wimpy Kid series, the entry level of book reading. It's like your first video game being one of the Pokemons, Pokemon Emerald to be precise, the best one. But then I transitioned to the Warrior series, my actual first book series I read, my introductory to furries. To summarize, it's a series about cats and them pretty much forming gangs in the wilderness, jumping each other. And when I say cats, I'm not talking Tony the Tiger or Mufasa, I'm talking your average household cat. But instead of them being in a loving home, terrorizing your HDMI cord, they're living in the forest having turf wars, killing each other. Like, this series was so dark and dramatic for a children's book, for no reason. Literally murking each other for like the smallest stretches of land, or because that rock used to belong to our clan 10 moonrises ago. No, not that type of clan. I guess that's not all too different from how humans operate. Another thing that cracked me up about this series was the terms they used for human things. Humans were referred to as 2 legs. If they saw me, it would be 3 legs.
In the film.
Oh, God.
Just like that. That was, I believe that.
Vehicles were referred to as monsters, which makes sense in their POV because cars are terrifying as a human being. Do you want to know what the term tree eaters is referring to? It's not a racist term. They're talking about bulldozers. All in all, it was an interesting series looking back at it, and it's not a good reread at the age of 22. You know, back in the day when the Scholastic Book Fair would come around to your school every year, it would be like this huge deal. What a huge scam that was. Everything was overpriced. I knew that as a 10-year-old who had very minimal knowledge about money. Like, I was usually given a few bucks every year, but the only thing that ever got me was like a reflective bookmarker or a couple of erasers. But there was this one time in which I allegedly might have borrowed some money from my parents' piggy bank and purchased one of the Minecraft tutorial books from the book fair. The one with the pickaxe on it. Honestly, it was pretty informative looking back at it, especially for a kid who didn't know how to play Minecraft and wasn't watching YouTube yet. A funny thing about these book fairs was the Lego visual dictionaries, because kids would literally steal the minifigures all the time. Kids would do these books like Thanos did Vision. It got to the point in which kids weren't allowed to touch these books at the fair unless they were buying it. But the most exciting parts of the book fair, by far every year, was the new Guinness World Record books. These books were like crack to kids. These books might have also been the most stolen things in my elementary school. The funny thing about these books was it was pretty much a reskin of the previous year, just with a different colored cover. It was like a new Madden dropping every year, nothing substantially changed. As I got older and started reading more young adult books like Artemis, Fowl, and of course the Percy Jackson series, which I guess both series are considered children's books. But I read these books when I was a little more older, like 12 and 13. Coincidentally, both of these books have terrible film adaptations. At least Percy Jackson redeemed itself a little bit with a decent TV series. The Artemis Fowl movie is quite foul. But there was this one young adult book series that I fell in love with that doesn't have a terrible film adaptation, the Alex Rider series. To summarize, a teenage spy who worked for a secret government organization, MI6, going on insane missions. It gets so crazy in these books. Quick spoiler: clones, terrorism, PTSD, nukes, space missions. It gets wild in these books, especially for a teenager. These books to this day are really good, and not in the sense that the writing is phenomenal or it's realistic, quite the contrary, but has you on the edge of your seats, even though you know the main character is going to save the day somehow. It's kind of like watching Transformers. Yeah, it's basic and the plot makes no sense, but it will keep you entertained. There's also a TV series based on these books, and it's not bad. 3 seasons have already been released, so it has some success. Now, of course, a lot of unrealistic things happen in the show, like in the books. Spoiler alert, Alex Rider saves the world a bunch. But what do you expect from a young adult book about a teenage spy fighting terrorist organizations? I will say this though, it always irks me when like kids or teenagers are able to beat up fully grown adults who are like 20-year-old Green Beret veterans. Like a karate chop to the spine of a fully trained military man isn't going to knock him out. Or like an 80-pound woman is able to neutralize 5 grown men because she did gymnastics when she was younger and her father abused her. One thing about the TV show that is kind of funny is how old the actors playing the teenagers are. Like Alex Rider, the actor playing him, is like 16 in the series. In the show, he is 28. The final book series I want to talk about that dominated my Gen Z youth was The Ranger's Apprentice. Besides the Percy Jackson series, The Ranger's Apprentice was my favorite childhood series growing up. Set in a medieval time period about a team named Will who joins the ranks of people called Rangers, who are like the Swiss Army knife for their kingdom. They spy, act as trackers, and have the ability to fight. Will's a badass with a bow with a horse named Tug and a messer named Howl. This is actually a series in which I wouldn't mind a TV show being adapted for. I don't think it would be hard to adapt. The story isn't that complicated, and the main characters have personalities that would translate well to TV. It's your standard swords and knights story, with a little more hiding in the shadows with minimal fantastical elements. Like, magic isn't a huge part of the story. I think it would be cool. Honestly, there are so many books that I read growing up that I forgot about. Maze Runner, Big Nate, Amulet, Bone, The Way of the Shadows. Underrated series, by the way. Would also make a good TV adaptation. Shout out Kyler. Overall, I kind of hate nostalgia. It just makes me miss being a kid. It is what it is though. Even though I liked a lot of these books when I was younger, when recently rereading some of them, it's not that enjoyable as it used to be, which makes sense considering the target audience. Like Percy Jackson, my favorite book series of all time, isn't really as funny as I remember it being. Partly just because I outgrew the humor, and partly because social media has rotted my brain. Anyways, comment down below some old Gen Z books you read as a kid that I didn't mention. Thanks for watching, make sure to like and subscribe, and adios.